The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for this year's final session of WBEX 2013. I truly hope you have enjoyed the session so far. The ones that you have not been able to attend, obviously you have loads of time to catch up on. The executive committee decided this year that we were going to extend your access from 6 months to 8 months. So you actually have 8 months to access all the recordings. And also, if you download them, you can keep them forever. So you actually have permanent access provided that you take the time to actually go and download them. And also there's the podcast. The podcast is now live, I believe. So what that means is that you can go onto iTunes, download all the sessions onto your MP3 player or iPhone or Android, and you can learn on the go. So this session here, Howard is going to blow your mind with some awesomeness. And what you can actually do is you can download that onto your phone. If you are going to a coaching session, which you feel that this session will be relevant to, on the way to that coaching session, you can actually be listening to it and reminding yourself, revisiting the material. And that goes for all the sessions. Not only that, as we know, we have the notes, the professional note takers, they're also known as coaches, and have been joining us. The feedback from them has been great. And obviously we have the transcripts as well as the videos and everything else. So you have all of that to catch up on and use for the next 8 months. Now, today, as always, I would love you to jump onto facebook.com/WBECS afterwards and post on there your feedback, your comments. If you have any questions that don't get answered, we would love to hear them on there. That would be super. Not only that, I'm going to be sending you out a note someday, I think today, just saying some things in there. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll also have a feedback survey next week. So put all that aside and bring yourself into the present, into the moment, into this session that's going to be now. It's going to be a really, really super one. I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say, because I understand that I'm going to be, this part of this session is going to involve me being coached. And what makes me even more nervous, but Howard reassures me, is the fact that this session is called What Happens When Coaching Engagements Go Bad. So I'm like, oh, what does that mean? But Howard's reassured me that that's all is going to be well. So Howard will tell you more about that
Absolutely.
afterwards. So don't worry about that. Anyhow, so well, it gives my it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you one of the world's top 50 coaches, Howard Morgan. He's an executive coach who has led major organizational change initiatives in partnership with top leaders and executives at numerous international organizations. He was named as one of the world's top 50 coaches and identified as one of the 5 executive coaches with a proven record of success and has published several books. Howard has worked with over 500 CEO and executive team members from more than 50 countries and from a diverse industry base, including chemical, information technology, financial services, media, retail, and real estate. Howard hangs around with an amazing array of rock stars. All of the top speakers that have presented at WX, they're all Howard's personal friends. And Howard's is one of those people you need to learn from and learn more about. He's an absolute star. I actually have been introduced to some of the speakers through Howard, in fact. So look forward to this session. It's going to be a great one, and it's the final one. So we're going to go out with an absolute bang. Anyway, without further ado, I would like to hand over to my very good friend Howard Morgan. Over to you, Howard.
Hey, thanks very much, Ben. And yes, we are going to put Ben to work and get sort of him doing a thing. I'm glad we're finishing with this session because one of the things that and it may be a sort of an extension to call a coaching engagement going bad. We can be polite, but a lot of the questions I get from people are, what happens when you start off strong and all of a sudden you get a right turn in a coaching session? So purpose today is to say, okay, what can you do? And there's, if we really take a look at it, the goals of this session are kind of going to be as follows. First thing is, as soon as we, hang on a sec here. Remember how we were talking, Ben, about the fact that sometimes it doesn't move ahead. There we go. The first thing we're going to talk about is understand what makes a good coaching engagement. If we need to figure out what a bad one is, obviously the logical thing, what makes a good one? Now, some of you have heard this many times. We'll see if I come up with some new ideas, etc. The second is, what characteristics must a coach and a coachee have? One of the things I learned a long time ago was, as coaches, we sort of have a lot of people telling sort of what makes a good coach, how it operates, what are some of the attributes. What we don't tend to talk about a lot is, so to really do coaching, what has a good coachee? What are those characteristics they have to have? And some of that gets to the point of when things go bad. A lot of the time what we really end up with is when it was somebody that's really not as engaged in the coaching process as we are. They may tell you they are, but they're not. Next goal is, what is a bad coaching engagement? How do you know when it's starting to go bad? How do you know things aren't working, etc.? And the last one is, and that's the one Ben's going to help me with, is what's a tool for every coach to have in their back pocket? What I've really done is come up with sort of a quick process, which we're going to demonstrate later, that says, you know, what do you do to kind of get control again? And how do you make that work? Because I would tell you overall, and then for those, and it looks like a lot of you were in the session last month, structure is your friend when it comes to coaching. For most of us, we start off probably being too open-ended. I would say that initially you need to be very structured, then as sort of the environment necessitates, you can start to get a lot more open-ended. So now as we go through this, much like last time, what I'd love is to send in notes, questions on your screen, because one thing Ben's going to do is we'll stop every once in a while and kind of answer those questions. Things that probably helps me is the ability to kind of answer things when we're still on the topic, rather than waiting to the end and trying to figure out where the question was generated. So, make sense, Ben?
It is perfect,
okay.
Howard. Thank you so much.
I'm going to start with a story, and this story has always been something. It happened about 10 years ago, and it's one that has stuck with me and resonated ever since. One of the things that probably when I first started coaching, I, like most people, thought, you know, a coaching engagement, what it really in many ways should be based on is how much I can help the person and the frequency in which I meet with them. So somehow that time and impact were the measurements. What I learned is, in many ways, is its impact almost is than time. That one of the things in working with some very senior people is they really don't keep track of how much time you spend. It's more how impactful you are. Now, I realize for not everybody on the call is that true, but the more you can migrate people that way, the better off you are. So, for example, the story I'm going to tell you is I was working with a senior executive team, and I'd worked with this client for a long time, and they were a phenomenal client. The CEO, who I'd worked with for probably 10 years, had built himself a really great team, and the team was operating on all, they were fantastic. And one of the things that he wanted me to do is talk to each team member and see, okay, is there anything they're not happy with? Because what he didn't want to do is have headhunters come in, take away their talent. So what he said is, if you can talk to each team member. Well, one of the things that I did is talk to each person, asked them a series of questions, and I knew them, so it was a great conversation. And one of the things that I asked them about is sort of, what's your greatest achievement of the last year? Now, one individual that I was meeting with had been responsible for a project, and the project they were responsible for was of a major impact to the firm. And what they had done is they had, in a matter of a year, introduced a new product that brought $75 million profit to the bottom line. So it was huge. And one of the that they had done is they had worked really hard. They had made all sorts of sacrifices, including one of the sacrifices they made was they had bought tickets for a traveling version of Lion King. And the traveling version was in town for whatever 3 weeks, promised to take their children and their spouse. And what they had done is bought tickets and sort of let everybody know that on this particular day, they really needed to take the night off. Well, you can figure what happens. We were getting close to a July 1st deadline. And what happened was that he quickly determined there was no way he was going to make Lion King. So what he did is he phoned up the kids, said, I'm sorry, I can't make it. And they said, it's okay, Dad, don't worry. Anyway, Dad, Dad tried to get tickets. It had left town. So the boss was certainly appreciative in the project. So after July 1st, and it got a wonderful success, one of the things the boss did is gave this person a one-time, on top of whatever else they would get, a one-time $3 million bonus, which, by the way, is not shabby in any country. So when I got to the question of what was the most memorable part of the last year, I was anticipating the person was going to say, my $3 million bonus. And I said, so I guess it was $3 million bonus, right? And they said, no, it wasn't at all. I said, okay, what was the most meaningful part of your last year then? And he said to me, well, you remember The Lion King and I never got to take my kids? One of the things that happened was that my boss, the CEO, came in mid-July and said, I know you promised to take your kids. I know I caused you not to meet your commitment. What I've done is I've arranged at the end of the month for you and your family to fly to New York. I've got all the airfare. I paid for the hotel. Here's the $500 for food for you guys to see Lion King and have a good weekend. Person said to me, I'll never or the company as long as I live. What was more fascinating is that I actually went back and checked and said, how much did this cost? And it cost less than $5,000. So as you think about coaching, I want you to think about Lion King, because in effect, one of the things sometimes we get caught up in coaching is not how to always have something of value when we meet with a person. So every session that you're going to sit down with a person, your goal is to have something that you can drop at some point that's going to have impact and have them see things from a different perspective. If you go in and totally listen, it's not that you won't be effective, but you'll never be truly effective. So I throw that out as a thought on sort of what to do. Now, let's talk about what makes a good coaching engagement. One is there has to be a clear understanding of the situation. Now, this you say, Howard, this sounds kind of obvious. Well, it is, sort of. Many times in a coaching engagement, it's one person's perspective that you're asked to work off of. And the problem with one person's perspective, it makes the assumption that it's correct. So case in point, I've actually gone in, talked to the person's boss, started working with them, only to find out the boss is the only person that has that point of view. So the time, if you're going to have a good coaching engagement, you have to make sure that whatever data you have is right. The next part is you also have to know that the outcome is really clear and get alignment on that in the beginning. So with the boss and the person say, what is the desirable outcome and how are we going to measure it? Again, if the outcome's not clear, their ability to attain it and have a good coaching engagement goes down dramatically. Third one, most of us that probably do this for a living recognize that without good data, it's almost impossible to take people and really coach them well. Data allows you to avoid the defensiveness. It allows you to avoid the excuses. It allows you to kind of get a perspective from somebody that's open and willing to kind of listen to your point of view. The next one's interesting. When a person discloses their plan, what I would tell you is Marshall Goldsmith and I did an article, which is Leadership as a Contact Sport. It was one of the top 25 ranked articles a few years ago. And it really said, so what makes a difference when it comes down to training programs, coaching, etc.? What we found was it wasn't what happened sort of in those sessions, it's what happened after. And what we believe pretty passionately is if somebody isn't willing to share their plan, chances are people aren't going to notice the difference. So, case in point, if you think about, so for example, I'll give you a personal example for me. If I'll walk in every once in a while, as most of us do, and my lovely wife will be there and she'll, have a brand new hairstyle, and I'll sort of walk up and go, boy, that looks fantastic, you changed your hair. And she will say to me, oh, yeah, but that was 3 months ago, right? I think we are lousy at noticing change. And I think one of the problems is we kind of keep putting that as a measurement rather than saying, so what I do now is say, look, if you're going to change your hairstyle, etc., let me know. So I know, so I know to keep an eye open for it. It can seem manipulative, but if you tell people what is going to change, people don't see change. And here's an example of that. If I took a coachee and I said, okay, they go back and they communicate that they're going to work on listening. Here are 3 things you're going to see me do to show that I'm doing a better job of listening. And in each of those 3, here's the behaviors you're going to see. What people do is they look at those. So in reality, what's going to happen is probably of the 7 interactions the next 6 months, 6 are going to be fantastic and 1's going to be a failure. Difference is if I don't do that, and instead what will happen is the 6 times they'll do it absolutely the right thing, the 1 time they won't, and guess what people are going to talk about? What's the one thing, I knew Billy didn't do that. Billy never listens. So part of it is you need to change people's perspective. And to do that, you really need to have the person disclose the plan. Which really gets to the non-negotiability of follow-up. I will tell you that, and it's worked pretty well for me. If I take a look, about 20% of all the coaching engagements I'm asked to work in. So these are things that people want me. About 20% I don't do. And my barometer is, and I'll get to it in a little while, my barometer is if it doesn't sound good, it's only going to get worse. And I think sometimes what we do is take those assignments thinking that we'll make it work. For those out there that have managed to do that, I love you to death. I've never figured out how to, once in a while I can do it, but what I do is end up frustrating myself more. When the boss is in agreement, funny story on that, was working with a chairman of a company, and it was actually based in Europe. And the chairman said, gee, Howard, can you come and work with this person? I said, great. So collected data, worked with a person. They did a phenomenal job. What happened, though, at the end, the boss said, I don't think they improved enough. What became very clear is the boss had really no desire for them to succeed. What the boss wanted is just to have one exercise that they could point to say they were trying to be fair and give the person a chance. So part of that is get the boss's sign up for what is going to make a difference and have the person satisfied. When you like who you are, I talked about before, that's just what I would call gut feel. And just for those international, it may not translate well. If your perception is that you're really going to be able to help this person, then that's a good thing. Now, what I'll tell you is that be careful. A lot of the time, and when we did the book a few years, there's way too much emphasis in my mind on chemistry. I think some of the most impactful coaches are the opposite of what the person who they would pick. So case in point, in coaching, and one of the things I encourage companies to do is pick a person for the individual. Don't have what I call the beauty contest. Because the trouble with a beauty contest is someone who, they're going to look for somebody they think they can work with and therefore probably manipulate, and that's not a great measurement. Getting along with somebody is not the goal, it's bringing sustained improvement. The last point, know who the customer is. I have and this was the most disputed thing when we did our book. For most of us, we believe whoever is paying the bill is the customer. Not to be confused with confidentiality. So case in point, when I meet with someone, one of the things that I do is I say, okay, both of us at any point can get out of this. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to agree on what is confidential, but as far as the company getting information to tell them they're not wasting their money, I'll share it with you, but that's information they have the right to know. I don't consider that confidential. So that's that one. And because a lot of the time what will happen is we view it as the person, but the trouble is they're not the client. So if they're, and I run across this all the time, where companies won't use a coach because they used them before, the person loved the coach to death, but the company didn't think they got value. So I think that's where coach engagement turns bad because of us as coaches. Any questions, Ben, so far?
Bear with me 2 seconds.
Sure, sure.
Okay, can you give an example of deciding what is confidential?
Good question. Um, Generally, what I say, and by the way, I think this is two-way. I think another example of a bad coaching engagement, you go back and tell everything, and I don't tell much, right? Because, or they try to use my information against me. So I think confidentiality is something that I work out right in the beginning. What I say is, look, you can say anything you want. At some point, I'm going to tell you that we've probably talked about it enough and need to move on. If it's something that involves legal or something else, I'm probably going to stop you mid-sentence and say, if you finish this sentence, it's something that I can't treat as confidential. So it's a little bit like a lawyer, right? Or a psychiatrist. If they hear someone saying, I'm going to go injure a person, the client patient or the patient doctor privilege goes away. I think it's the same thing with a coach. If the person goes, I'm going to go put a virus in the company computer, to me, that's not confidential. So I think things that are confidential are our discussions, our openness, but not what I might call improvement or what I might call actions the person is taking to make sure there's a return on investment.
Thank you for that, Howard.
That sort of answer it, Ben, do you think?
Yes, great
Okay.
answer. Thank you. How do you establish trust with a client when the company has access to coaching information?
Man, that's a good question. I think the best way to do it is to be very open and say, here's the information I know that the company has about the coaching. Here, let's agree on what. So for me, what I would do is say, I will share with you. I'm not going to lie, but I will work with you to tell you so that we agree on what I'm going to say. So where it gets more problematic is where feedback reports, et cetera, are seen by the company. Now, what I would tell you as a coach, normally what I'll do with companies is tell them that's actually a pretty stupid move. And the reason it's stupid is if the company has access to that, if they fire the person has the right to subpoena it. If the company doesn't have access to information collected about the person, then they can't subpoena it. So that's one thing teaching your clients, make sure they understand, because it's normally what in my experience, when situations where they would have liked to get the information and I've said you can't because it's confidential, what I've found is normally it would hurt the company, not the person. Because you always find some people say this person's great. So, but I think the best way to build, first of all, I have a saying that works for me around trust. Disclosure builds trust. If you're open and you disclose, that's what builds trust. Trust is not built on the fact how long we see viewpoints the same, etc. So trust is really another way, if you think about it, about respect. We respect people that behave in a way that we know is right, even though we may not be asking for that.
Thank you, Howard.
Okay.
Okay, so perhaps one more question,
and again,
or would you like to?
Sure.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
With discussing the plan, what about coaches who are not in the right choosing space to get their priorities on outcomes?
I wish I knew what choosing space, how I should interpret that. If whoever did that question, if they can just send a quick note note in again on, and they can sort of what they mean by choosing space, that would help.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay.
Not in.
Well, let's come back to that question.
Okay,
I'll give you another one for now.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Is it that if I'm thinking of leaving someone or something confidential or something to talk with, the customer is paying. Sorry, there's another question. I don't really understand what the question is. Won't the client feel vulnerable to opening up if the customer gets feedback reports?
If the customer gets feedback report, I think, first of all, you don't own that part unless you're doing an interview based, and And if you're doing interview-based, the report I would write would be different than it would be if it was confidential. So that'd be the first thing. In other words, I write something where it's pretty fact-based. A whole lot of people say it. I won't put in sort of 1, 2, 3-person things, because what I really want to do if I'm doing it and it's confidential is be pretty open and transparent. If it's a 360 sort of, they've got their own 360 system, my take is, you know, generally what I would do is just talk about that in the first session with the person. Say, look, I know your 360 is public. That part of it they have, it's, you know, they're going to see it. What we're going to do is let's talk about what is confidential between us. So I would just clarify the distinction between the two.
Thank you, Howard.
Should we go move on, or do you have clarification on that one question, Ben?
Okay, choosing space as in they make different choices before they have gotten past their limiting beliefs.
Okay. I think part of it is to be, again, if we believe disclosure builds trust, I think sometimes what I say to people is you've made some bad choices, bad decisions. Let's look now at how you influence. So, and I'm dealing with somebody like that right now, actually, where they've done some really dumb things. And, you know, really the only way for them to do it is to go back and say, you know, I get them to go back to people in their organization with me there and say, you know, I've probably done some things that weren't very wise. And what I can't change those. I do apologize for those. What I'd like to do is have you look and judge my behavior moving forward. And that's generally where I'll jump in and say, can everybody live with that? If I'm doing one-on-one interviews and I know that's happened, one of the questions I ask people in the interview, I'll say, if the person improves, are you willing to change your mind? If they say, excuse me, if they say no, the next thing I say is, are you willing to not get in the way? So I'm okay with if they say no, they burn their bridge with me. I just don't want them to burn everybody else's bridges.
Super. Thank you, Howard.
Okay, let's a few more things, and we'll come back then.
Okay, no problem.
Make sense?
That's perfect, Howard. Sorry.
Excellent. No, that's fine. So let's talk about what are characteristics of a good coach. And this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, by the way. One is, if you're going to be a great coach, you've got to be engaged. You've got to be interested in what the person says, but you've also got to recognize that you are the time. But earlier I said around structure, I'm a great believer that you own the timeline. So in effect, if it gets out of control, it's your fault, not their fault. Second, anticipates change in direction. And this gets a little bit to, I think, one of the questions. I always assume in any coaching session that it may take a right angle. It also may be that in a particular coaching day that I'm meeting with the person, it's a bad day for them because things happen outside of the coaching relationship. And what I really need to do is be able to accept and change my approach or change my timing when I think the person is either in pain or having other issues. You know, if I believe they're committed, the last thing I want to do is say, well, we said we were going to do this today, let's pound away at it. Directs the flow. I'm a great believer of, and the good news is Ben and I will give you an example of this later, but you kind of have to move things along, leave it too open-ended. Listens and adjusts, acts like a manual transmission. Now, for those internationally, acts like a car. we lazy people in the U.S. have automatic transmissions, but manual transmission simply is there are times when I hit a very low gear and control 80% of the conversation. There's times when I take a very high gear and I let them go and merely shape them, almost like a guardrail on the road. And this is, you know, I've always said that great coaches are in the rock. And what I mean by that, a great coach, first of all, removes the rocks that people hide behind. They remove the rocks that people throw at them, and they remove the rocks that get in people's way. So if something comes up and I'm a coach and it really is going to be an obstacle, I'm either going to deal with it, or it may be that I'm going to say I have to get out of this coaching engagement because it's not one where I can control the dynamics. So flip side, what are characteristics of a good coachee? Well, one is they have to be open, and this gets to a couple of questions, Ben, you asked. If they're not willing to be open and talk candidly, I can't really help them, right? It's they have to trust that at least, and they can be hesitant, that's okay, but they've got to be open about where they're in alignment. Now, I will give you a quick tip that you can use. If you've got information, whether or not it be a feedback report or you've done interviews, the quickest way to get people to be open is whatever the major issue is that you're trying to work with them on, ask them what people at home would say in their home, except that the country sort of frowns on that. But for the most part, most countries are open to that. But say, you know, what would your kids or your spouse say? What I find is they'll pause and smile at me and go, they say the same thing. And I say, okay, great. Then one of the things that I want to do is talk about, let's do it the right way. Let's help you at home as well as help you at work. Next is trust the coach and listens and weighs input. Here's the thing about coaches. I always say to somebody in the beginning, you know, I don't know all the right answers. I can give you a lot of good stuff, and you have to pick what works for you. I just need somebody to be willing to do that. If somebody is going to, everything I bring up, tell me that it doesn't apply to them or it's not important, chances are it's a coaching engagement about to be a disaster. So somebody will do that, which gets to the question of, you know, is open to change. I've had people who go, yeah, that's right, you know, but I'm 55 years old. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, saying, right? Horrible. Of course you can. Give you a perfect example of that. I was teaching a university program in Toronto, actually, and as it was an MBA program. It was at night, and most of the classes, you guys can imagine, were somewhere in that 25 to 35 age group. Right up front was a 62-year-old gentleman. I know that because I asked him later, but he was 62. About the third class, I decided, okay, I got to ask this guy why he's here, because I was just, it drove me crazy. And I said, if you wouldn't mind me asking, why are you taking the class? I said, how old are you? He said, 62. And he said, it's really simple. He said, I woke up about a year ago and discovered that basically I had been pretty hard on people in my leadership career. And I said for the last few years I was going to do what I could to be a better leader for them. That's the person that's a good coachee. And that really gets to the question of it now. Actually wants to improve him or herself, not just the company. There's nothing that, for the most part, unless those of you are really doing business coaching, there's nothing we do that doesn't help people in their personal lives as well as their business lives. If somebody says to me, there are three things to work on, I'll say to them, okay, which one, if you left this company tomorrow, which one would make you better? And quite often they'll come up with one, and I'll say, okay, if you treat this organization, if you're really so tainted on this organization, use this organization to build your skills before you move on. So if you really believe they're trying to fire you anyway, now's a great chance to pick one of the things we're talking about, follow, execute on it so that when you arrive at the next place, that you're going to be a star performer. And it's going to communicate. So flip side is what makes a bad coaching engagement. Well, one isn't trusting your intuition. I've not, you know, when we talk about when coaching situations go bad, I have not talked to very many coaches that can't almost identify the moment where the coaching engagement starts to turn bad. Our problem as coaches is we somehow think we can fix it. And sometimes what you have to say is, we can, but sometimes you have to give yourself the freedom to say, sometimes we can't. And it just isn't that easy. Next thing is they want coaching for someone else. So in other words, they want to talk to you you to coach them, but it's to help them work with Bob, who they can't hate, and Bob's got all the issues, not them. Short of getting both people in the room, you're not going to have any credibility trying to go to Bob and say, here's all the things that Bill thinks you should change. It's a good saying when you get in that situation is just to say, you know, with all due respect, this coaching is about you and about what you need to do, what you need to change, and how you can be more effective. Want to use coaching as a safe place to vent. I would tell you that there are far, none on this call, of course, but there are far too many coaches that think letting people just vent and listening is an effective tool. What happens, the longer you let somebody do that, and by the way, and sometimes it is appropriate, but the longer you get somebody do that, the more you lose control and respect of the coachee, which gets to want to help to fix something. How many engagements are you turning down? Remember I said 20%? If you're taking every engagement, some of those I guarantee you are bad. Part of what you, so for me, it's always about, if I don't think I'm really going to add impact, I got to tell you, it's not very much fun for me to do the coaching engagement. If I don't think that I can feel good at the end, what I normally do is say, I'm not judging the person, I just need to recognize that they need to do something different. You're not having the impact you want, you're not trying to save someone that did not start well. So I think we've covered off those. So just before we get to any major things that go wrong, our next slide, Ben, any questions?
Yes, the answer is lots and lots of questions.
Perfect, we love questions.
Okay, so where do we start? Okay, sorry, bear with me 2 seconds, I need to go back. Okay. Can you, sorry, you have to excuse me, I've just moved all my windows around, I'm fighting to get behind it. Can you elaborate
No
a
problem.
little on when follow-up is non-negotiable?
You know, I think it's, I would tell you, I don't think follow-up is ever non-negotiable. Or sorry, is always non-negotiable. I think follow-up, I always want to be able to say, how much did this person change? More for them than anything else, right? Because it's, if they're going to try certain things, if they don't get some positive feedback, like us human beings, they're going to, like an elastic band, they're going to pull back over time. So for me, follow-up is, so case in point, I won't do a coaching assignment if there isn't some measurement of follow-up. And we have articles that have measurement in it. It doesn't have to be a full-scale survey, but what it should be is, okay, over the last year, how is this person's effectiveness on a -3 to +3 scale? So it doesn't have to be comprehensive, but what I want to be able to do is say, how much has this person changed perception, and how much do I believe the person's changed?
Thank you, Howard.
Another one, Ben?
When disclosing the plan, what about coachees who are not in the right, oh, hang on, wait, we've already done that one. Okay. How do you balance being in control versus being controlling?
Boy, I'll tell you, most coaches, it would be interesting. I love the question. I have not met very many coaches that can be too controlling. I think if anything, they're not flexible enough, but I wouldn't call them too controlling. I think about, a good way of answering that is think about control as you're always in charge of the session. So I can be with somebody for an hour and I can let them talk for 50 minutes of it and still be in control. So control can be a one question, control, and again, I think Ben and I will sort of give you an example of this in a while, but it's really about the structure you put in place for the person to talk that allows you to always pull the reins back if you need to. So what I never want to be is too controlling, right? Because too controlling means it's my agenda and we're going to go on my agenda. What I want to do is say, this is my structure, and we're going to go through my structure with the degree of detail we need to. So I'll give you a perfect. I believe a good coaching session always starts with what's the objective of this session and how long we have. That's the first thing. Every coaching session ends with, okay, what have we agreed to do? Who's responsible for what? And when's our next coaching session? Now, sometimes I'll get somebody that says, boy, you know, don't know. I'm kind of busy. Okay, great. Let's put something on the calendar. And if we need to change it, we'll change it. Part of it is I want an end point for the person to keep them on track. I'm working with somebody right now that I already know the coaching engagement is going bad. Because what's happened is I've sent them 2 follow-ups saying, okay, you canceled the last meeting. When's the next one? And I think there's some organizational changes that are causing them to be really kind of disengaged. My goal at being a company is to try to re-engage them. At some point in the near future, it's, sorry, I'm not sure I can help anymore. I'm not going to say, gee, they don't return my calls. What I'm going to say is, I'm not sure that I haven't done as much value as I can do. And I would tell you, for those that do this a lot, every client where you're candid and say, I think I've done what I can do, appreciates the honesty a lot more than somebody who sends them a huge bill and doesn't change. There was a client I had, and it was the secretary of the company, as in corporate secretary. And they came to me and they said, Howard, we want you to, the chairman asked me, would you work with this person? I spent, I don't know, 4 conversations with them, of which it became very clear they were brilliant and they were just trying to work me. And I went and said, you know, I got to tell you, I don't think I can help this person. I'm not sure they're really committed. I'm not judging them. They then dropped $130,000 on another coach, and the person just made no changes. They manipulated them $130,000 worth. They've never used the coach again. So as a coach, I always worry about how is, you know, you can do something because you think what the person wants to do it, but always be very conscious of, is it going to be seen as a return on investment by whoever's paying the bill? It's the reason why, by the way, I very rarely will let somebody pay for their own coaching. I'm not judging that. It's just very complicated for me because it's hard to put a valuation on it, where I can put a valuation for a company very easily.
Thank you, Howard. Okay, in terms of confidentiality.
Any more questions before we move on, Ben?
In terms of confidentiality, what about if the person says they're planning to quit their job?
If they say they're planning to quit, I have one of 2 approaches. One is, I said before, is to say, okay, we're far enough along in the engagement that what I'd suggest is let's work really diligently over the next 2 to 4 weeks, build some skill, get some positive feedback for people, because A, it'll be better for a reference, and B, you'll get a chance to actually practice doing the right thing before you leave. Right? And I can say, look, and sometimes what I will do, depending on the company, is I won't bill them for that time. So in other words, I won't bill the company. And what I'll do is just assume I'm doing it because the person's going to probably hire me at the new company or say how good they are. The other option is to say, okay, great, why don't we just agree that we're going to that you've got a number of things going on, that you'll tell your boss you want to take a couple of months off in the coaching, and do it that way. And the reason I want them to do it is if I have to explain it, generally they're going to want detail. If the person says it, then they have no concerns about my confidentiality. There's probably a third thing, by the way, in answer to that question. Whoever asked it, celebrate it, because what it means is you've got enough credibility and trust from the person you're coaching to be honest with you, which is not an insignificant thing.
Thank you, Howard. Do you want another question?
Okay.
Carry on.
Let's take one more, and then we'll get ready for your big practice.
Oh my God. Do you have some tools? Oh, I'm a little bit nervous. Do you have some tools or techniques to screen coachees who would not be a good candidate?
I've got some questions. I'm not sure I have tools. I've got some questions, and let me give you a few. One is to say to a coachee, one of the things I'm going to require is for you to go back and follow up with the people that I talk with or the people that filled in the survey. Are you comfortable with that? If not, why? That's my first question. And they can say they're uncomfortable because, boy, it's awkward. And I say, great, I can help you with that. But that's my first question. The second thing is, why do you want coaching? And if they say to me, well, because I've been told I need to, then I'll push back and probably say this isn't going to be a party. This is going to be pain. I think another question that helps me determine a coachee that's not going to be very good is they're trying to win too much. So I think in the last webinar I talked about somebody who was just trying to prove how smart they were, or they're trying to prove that I don't know the company as well as them. If they're trying to win a battle before I even start helping, it's going to be a bad coaching engagement. And the final thing I would give you on that is, again, trust your gut. My guess is if all of you think back to a situation where a coaching engagement and it didn't go very well, if you think back at the beginning, part of you is going, this doesn't feel very good. And sometimes what we do is we say, we're overreacting. It's not that bad. We can help them. They'll turn around. I literally require the person before I start with them to say to me, I'm willing to put in the effort and the drive that you require of me for me to become more effective. If they'll say that to my face, then, what you'll find if it's a bad coachee, what they're going to say to you is, well, I'll try to do something that'll allow me to be more effective like what the company's looking for. That's a bad coaching engagement. Okay. Let's talk about some things that can go wrong in a coach. And this is going to lead up to Ben and I giving you some structure. And I think it gets to some of these great questions of, what can you do if all of a sudden you feel that way. But this is going to talk about what are the major things that can go wrong. The first thing that can go wrong is a bad contract. And a bad contract simply means you're making a deal that the person or you is incapable of actually delivering. I'll give you an example of an everyday bad contract. Everyday bad contract is when somebody walks in and says, do you have 5 minutes? I've never, ever had somebody only take 5 minutes. So part of it is, a bad contract is trying, or somebody will say, I'd like your opinion on something. And what we don't do is narrow it down right away. So we say we're going to help them, and it's going to take 15 days worth of work to figure out what it is they're actually working on. So to me, a bad contract is the amount of effort, time you have to put in is not consistent with the time you have. So soft skills. Sometimes people say, well, gee, I want you to help with soft skills. And I'll go, I don't do soft skills. If you want to tell me what it is behaviorally, I'm happy to help. Another bad contract is when the person's got a technical requirement, don't try to go down that road. So for example, I have people phone me up and say, can you have this person sort of deal better with financial acumen? And I go, no, it's not my area. There are plenty of people that can help that person or more effective at that. So it's knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at as well. So that's the first thing. The quickest way to not have a bad contract is to focus the coaching session. And what we're going to do in each of these, you're going to see that what Ben and I do in a minute is literally going to practice these skills. So it's focusing the coaching session, getting it very aligned. Next thing that can go wrong, wallowing. Well, all of us are guilty of this, myself included. I'll give you an example. I had somebody walk in the firm, in our firm, and they said, and I'll use a fake name, have you seen George? George is going around the office and he's asking questions and asking for more detail and being disruptive, and he's just making people uneasy, right? Wallowing is, I jump on and say, if you think that's bad, you should see what I had to fix yesterday with George. Here's what he did, and I spent. So don't pile on if you're trying to solve a coaching scenario. Don't give way more information than what's needed. What you really want to do, rather than wallow in it, is what you want to do is overview the situation briefly. And what I mean by that is, quite often as a coach, I'll say to people, can you give me 4 minutes? I don't need to know the whole story, because as a coach, there's only one of two directions I can go. One is to get a quick overview, which covers about 80% of the problem, or the other is a comprehensive one, which requires 3 weeks. The marginal benefit of that other 20% is not worth it to me as a coach. The problem is people will love talking about the situation, because part of it is they're frustrated and they're trying to get your thought. So I'll just say to people, give me the 2-minute version. Taking the monkey. Sorry for the people. Taking the monkey probably means nothing. Taking the monkey is a simple way of saying they try to give you their problem. Happens all the time. Again, an example of that I would give you is I was, again, teaching a night school course, and I had a student come up at the end and said, boy, Howard, love the course. I'm putting together, for the project you assigned, I'm putting together something that's really based in your expertise area. Do you have any books, et cetera, that'll shed some light on it? And I said, sure, I can do that. And next day I show up, forgot to bring the books in. They said, well, did you bring the books in? I said, no, gee, I'm sorry. I totally forgot. The next day, I remembered, put them on the front hall. Unfortunately, forgot them in the front hall. And the person I bumped, by the way, Howard, did you have a chance to bring the books? I said, gee, well, I'm sorry, they're on the hall. I meant to do it. And they said to me, well, if I don't get them soon, I'm not going to meet your deadline and have the assignment in on time. And I stopped, and I thought, somehow I'm taking their monkey. And what I did is I went over the window, took them with me, and I pointed at a building, and I said, what's that? They said, the library. And I said, it's a great place to find what you're looking for. So you will find coachees spend a lot of time trying to give other people their monkeys. People take monkeys that are very conscientious. My guess is a lot of you as coaches are trying so hard that you will, for example, let people give you the assignment of writing up some thoughts, writing up an action plan. One of the things that I do with an action plan with a coachee is say, here's the pen, here's paper, I'm going to give you a brainstorming of ideas that I think will help. Pick the ones that you think you resonate with the most and write them down. To me, and the reason is, I don't want to take their monkey. What I want them to do is own the plan. And the way to own the plan is by having them actually write it down. It's symbolic, but it works. So if we're taking the monkey, quickest way to create options, right? So what are our choices? What can we do? Rather than say, okay, let me figure out what to do, I say, what are our solutions? And as a coach, this is one of the most challenging areas, I would tell you. And the reason is, as a coach, our general tendency is to dive in and give an answer way too soon. What I try to do is at least get the person to give me some options, and I'll say, can I add a third? And by the way, a very important point, always ask permission to give an option. Because what I want to do is have them understand that it's their responsibility. I'm just asking permission because I think I have something that will be helpful. Otherwise, these conversations will turn the monkey again. Next one, plops. These are interesting words. So plops means that it kind of loses its momentum. People love talking about options. When it gets down to the actual solution, a lot of the time it'll just sit there because it's a lot more fun solving problems than executing on problems. So it just says, as a coach, what I've got to do is make sure that I keep the momentum through the choosing of the alternative and make sure it's something that they can implement in an appropriate time frame. Which, another way of putting it is, you need to urge action. And last one is trying. Everybody in this call has heard the phrase, if somebody says they're trying, the chance of probability is somewhere less than 10% they're actually going to do something. Trying is just a diffuser that's meant for the person to get rid of you. And there's no commitment. They're not making a commitment. So to answer that one is, and this back to an earlier question someone asked, is set and calendar next steps. Because one of the things I want to do is make sure there's something on the calendar and make sure that it's obviously in place. And to abbreviate all those things, it ends up being focus. So just a model that I developed that really says, how do we focus a coaching engagement to give us the highest probability of it not going bad? Now, some coaching engagements, you don't need to do this. But what I would say is, when something's not going well, this structure will improve your odds of getting it back 80%. Doesn't mean, I can't give you 100, but I give you 80%, because in this process, the only thing that's going to cause the 20% is when you find out they're really not as engaged and committed as what you thought they were, in which case that you can't control that. So I want to just make sure I control what I do, that I don't sort of control what other people do. Makes sense, Ben?
Makes perfect sense. Thanks, Howard.
Ben, are you there? Because you're about to be
hello,
shifted into action.
I am here. I'm just, there's a bit of a delay. I apologize. For some reason, it keeps delaying. There's a bit of a lag. So we need to be careful of that. I think there's
Don't worry about it.
A 3-second lag or so.
Okay. Then I'll have to talk slower during that 3 seconds. What Ben and I are now going to do is I'm going to take, and by the way, it's a pretty good example of what I'm talking about when I talk about this model, because I really don't know what Ben's going to say, other than the fact we know Ben is not a bad coach. What we do know is that I'm going to walk him through and try to do a quick demonstration. Now, chances are it would be longer than this, but I'm going to try to demonstrate it so you can see in real terms how it works. Second thing is, so he's going to be him. I don't know what the thing he wants me to help him with, but it'll become pretty clear for all of us. It'll probably take 10 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and deal with some more questions. As we go through each step, sort of, focus the situation, etc., what I'm going to do is put up things that, as a coach, behaviors or questions that are part of what I could ask. So I may not deal with all these, but I'm going to give you, for each phase, I'm going to put up on the screen things that are of questions you could ask at that phase. Make sense? Ben, are you set?
I am ready to rock and roll. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start with focus the session. And again, Ben and I are going to be doing it real time, so bear with us. We'll take about 10 minutes. We're not going to stop during it, because what I want to do is give you kind of the start to finish, and then after we're finished, as always, welcome questions and clarify. Ben, thanks very much for getting together for a few minutes. I have about 10-15 minutes to sort of walk through sort of the situation that you're asking for my help on. Is that enough time, do you think?
That would be a great starting point, I believe. 10-15 minutes is perfect.
Perfect. And by the way, I think that's a great way of putting it. I think we may not solve it, but I think as long as we get a first step and we manage to go in the right direction, I think that would be great. One of the things that I would like to do is keep some notes as we go through this, so that I can sort of come back. So you have no objection to me keeping some notes?
That's absolutely no problem at all, Howard. That's no problem at all, Howard. I'm not sure if you heard that.
And the other thing is, I'm going to assume that I didn't, but and one of the things I want to do is at least get off to a good start. So from that standpoint, if we could get one thing done today, what would demonstrate time well spent? What would be a good deliverable at the end to judge yourselves?
Okay, a good deliverable would be to gain some more clarity over my decision,
okay,
which is a topic I'd like to discuss.
Perfect. That's great then. Then I'll tell you what would be really helpful to me, Ben, is if you can give me a real brief, no more than 3-4 minutes at the most, overview of the challenge that you're wrestling with.
Okay, I could probably do it a bit quicker than that, but so
sure.
My challenge is that I have run WBEX for the last 3 years, and it's grown fantastically well, and we're very pleased with how it's gone, and the feedback's been brilliant. However, it's exhausting. It absolutely takes everything out of me. It puts everything into me as well because the feedback and everything that we receive from coaches around the world is brilliant, and I love it. And just hearing the results that everyone is getting and learning is super. But as I say, it's about 10 months of work. For about 4 or 5 months, I'm pretty much working 20 hours a day, 6 days a week. And so I have an option in the back of my mind to potentially have a year off so that I can work on some other projects, um, and then come back to it the following year. Now, my dilemma is that I don't want to lose the momentum that I build up, um, and I really enjoy it. So although it's a lot of work and I do actually really enjoy it. And the results, it's been great for our business. It's been great for making connections. It's been great for being able to travel the world and meet lots of awesome coaches and everything, and get to hang out with the best coaches in the entire world and be invited to parties and whatnot. That's great, and I love that. um, and I don't want to lose that momentum. So that's my dilemma is really around balancing what I'm doing with the event and the momentum and relationships we built with actually having a life outside of WBEX as well, and doing some other projects I really want to engage with, some charity project.
Oh, neat. Okay, that's great. Especially as a newlywed, that's always challenging. Does this decision affect anybody else other than you? Are there other people that would be positively or negatively impacted by this?
Yes, I guess it would affect my wife, and it would affect the coaching world, I believe, and some of my partners as well, that we work with. It would certainly affect those. As
Okay.
Yeah, I guess all of the stakeholders involved in WBEX currently.
Okay. One of the things let's talk about for a minute is I'd be interested in, because you're approaching it very much from a black or white perspective, and I understand why. Um, what I have for you is, what do you think are options, workable or non-workable, that would allow you to accomplish your goal, really, which is to have, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, some balance, but also, it takes a lot out of you. You want to make sure that you obviously around with your wife. It's terribly rewarding on one hand, but there's a cost. So if I said to you, what are options that would help take away some of the pressure, but at the same time um, allow you to still have the benefits of doing it? What do you think some of the options are?
Um, I think some of the options are obviously to grow my team,
Okay, good one.
which
Yeah.
we actually did that this year. But fortunately, I won't say unfortunately, the event grew so much that it outgrew my grown team. So that meant I had to kind of pick up not the slack, but it meant that we had that much more work, even though we grew the team. So there's that option to grow it even further, but that obviously has an
Yeah.
associated risk that goes with that.
Yeah.
Um, the other options as well is we've looked into doing something that's a bit more ongoing instead of having a huge launch throughout summer, May, June, but instead to do something that's more ongoing, like to set up a subscribed paid subscription podcast that's maybe $25 a month, that has the same content kind of drip fed throughout the year. Um, but that we kind of lose some benefits doing that. Um, yeah, and I think that would probably be my two options that I've considered, um, in terms of.
Well, certainly another option you've talked about would be to do it on a less frequent basis, right?
Yes, yes. So do it. Yes, sorry, I should say yes. To have it maybe 3 years out of 4 instead of every year.
Okay. Um, it would seem another way, and can I give you a suggestion?
Yeah, I'd love a suggestion.
One would be to look at highly credible organizations that have the infrastructure to partner with. And I realize there's a plus and a minus to that, but the benefit is you might both be able to handle some of the scenario challenges and share those, and at the same time be able to get some of the infrastructure that's going to relieve some of that pressure from the people you've hired, right? Because it seems to be, because as I hear you talking, one of the things is you're almost hiring chasing the bus rather than getting ahead of it. And I understand why, because there's obviously cost implications, and you're selling something where all of its value comes at the end. But I mean, to that end, is there a way to get, other than podcasts, is there any way to get the value or the financial spread over a longer period of time in advance?
Yeah, I mean, we have we will do launches throughout the year so that we have revenue coming in throughout the year. I mean, some of my bigger challenges, I guess, if you go to the root of this, is that I've never been a manager and I've never been managed in my life.
Okay. Okay.
So I am, for the first time, in the last year or so, building up a team, and I've always been a kind of an entrepreneurial employee in all of my jobs. I've always been in the business and executive coaching industry since literally the day after I left college, I entered into the industry, and but yet I've always been in an individual role. I had one employee once for about 3 weeks before he left, when his business did some great things, and that was it. And the rest of the time, I've just been completely on my own in my employed roles, and then as an entrepreneur, I've just started building my team in the last year, 2 years. But we've always been able to run our business very lean. Like many people wouldn't, $1 million business that's runs on 2 employees really, plus we bring in contractors. So everything I've always done is not been someone that I've had to manage. I've been a project manager who does all the management for me, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
now it's my
Yeah.
own team. It's a different kind of thing, which I'm not used to.
In this process, Ben, where's your growth been? I mean, I understand that it's grown, and the reason I asked the question is there a benefit either in developing some good leadership skills, some good strategic skills? To what degree is there value in investing in yourself, and as a result taking some of the pressure off, or is this just a linear sort of workflow?
No, I think you're exactly on the money. That's where I need to be investing is in myself, in those specific skills. The the irony of it all is that I have the world's largest network of business and executive coaches, and a lot of the things that I need help with. God help me with saying this, because I'm going to end up with a million emails saying, "Oh, this happened before." Is that I have this amazing network of people that can help me with these skills that I really need help with. It's a bit of a funny one, because I have so much. It's entering into a bit of a challenge. I could send out an email saying, "Can anyone help me with dot dot dot?" And wow, 20,000 emails come in and saying, "Yeah, I can help you." And my honest answer is that I am looking for a coach at the moment. I am looking for somebody, but I'm looking for something very, very specific. Someone that is can help me in a long-term journey to get to my true goals of what those are. So
well, let me ask you, I think that's a great important point, because it seems to me you have 2 issues here at play. And one probably is more urgent because it helps frame the second one. And what I mean by that is there's the personal choice of both your leadership skills, but also you finding the expertise you need to build yourself, which is then going to lead to a lot clearer decision making around your time frame, because part of that is how it unflows. Is that a fair statement?
yeah, it's a totally fair statement.
Let me give you a proposal. My proposal would be, if we said that if I help find a person that's going to allow you to get both the coaching and more, because the nice thing is you've said is you have a lot of great relationships with a lot of us, and in essence those people could add some value, but part of it is I think what you've done so far, sending it out, you swim in great suggestions. That doesn't help you prioritize and implement. So my suggestion would be, if you and I spent some time figuring out what are the criteria you want from that coach, what are the deliverables that are going to allow you to be more effective in making the decisions around the timing of future. Would that be a good first step in the solution?
That would be an exact step, because I'm almost trying to get to the end solution before I've almost got that plan in place and that guidance in place. Because it's almost like it's too big a step for me, if that makes sense.
Okay, and by the way, I think don't feel bad. You were saying coaches, remember that most of my wonderful colleagues, with the exception of a couple, don't have organizations, because they, from a business point of view, those are different skills than one's required to do this type of work, right? So there's a reason why there's more independent coaches than there are coaching organizations. So don't feel bad about that. I think that the challenge for us is to put something in place that's going to allow you to get this done in a short enough period of time, because obviously if you have it, you have to plan for next year pretty quick, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, we're already, while WBEX has been happening, we're already planning. I mean, I have six other businesses. I mean, WBEX is one of 5 events I'm running right now, and my events company is one of 6 businesses that I own. So it's yeah.
So I know you're thinking of going away next week to take a well-deserved break. If we said, what would be a good first step for you, and a time that we could do that, what would it be?
So a good first step for me would be to, book in a time to go when I returned back from Greece, or at least not necessarily return back from Greece, but at least have finished my vacation, my actual downtime of a week or so, and then sit down and start putting together those next steps with you.
Okay, perfect. I'll tell you what, why don't I give you a suggestion? Let's pick a date. We can always change it, but let's pick a date that you and I can talk about the type of information that might be helpful, and then you can run off and do it. So what you do is frustrate yourself trying to figure out what's critical information. Is that fair?
Okay, that's brilliant.
So when would be a good date to do that? We might have to.
Okay, so anytime. So basically, I'm going on a 1-week holiday starting on July 1st, but that could quite easily turn into a 2-week holiday. So after the 14th or 15th of July would be perfect. Any date after that.
Okay. I'll tell you what, why don't we pick the 15th, and let's agree that we'll talk at 9 o'clock Pacific time, and
that's perfect.
And we'll go from there. And the deliverable beef to scope out something that we can use moving forward. Fair enough?
That's absolutely perfect. This fits my diary lovely.
Perfect. Now, end of session. One quick thing, Ben. What you can do to make this real is, because I didn't want to. Do me a favor. Send me a couple times the week, and we will pick a time to actually do that.
Very cool. How can I say no to that?
Okay.
Very cool. I promise I will.
There you go. Perfect. So the reason I want to go through that, if you think about it, it gets to some of the questions that people have been asking. Structure does not, and it's helping people get to the point. Now, in Ben's case, it's interesting, because it became pretty clear. If I'd had longer, we could have gone down. I could have said, okay, what are the questions? But what I also have to do is weigh into that structure. How much can he handle before his brain fries? And that's true of any of us. There's a point when a baby step is a good first. What I really want him to do after our next discussion, Ben and I are going to talk about, okay, what's important criteria? Rank. So I'm going to say make a list, and I'll talk to him about it, and I'll say rank order them. So then for each of those, so when someone asks the question about structure before, that's what it means. I'm just going to put structure in place and make his pain go away. That's my goal, right? Because his goal is he's swimming in information without a way out. Is that fair, Ben?
I'd say that's pretty much bang on the money. Exactly the case.
Perfect. So we have some questions?
Okay, so my questions would be.
Or do we have questions?
Okay, my questions or questions. I'll save my questions for when we speak. But the questions.
That's other people's questions. You get one.
Yeah. I get one. Okay. In terms of, Oh, my mind's gone blank, Howard. You'll have to. I'll have to put it on to someone else
Okay.
because I've just been.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
just.
Let's
I'm in a
you and I
world.
will take it offline.
Yeah, I'm just in a world thinking of getting coached by Howard Morgan's pretty cool deal. So I'm just kind of buzzed by that. Okay, here we go.
And the
Um,
price is right.
yeah, the price. That's exact. You know what I mean? How can I say no at that price? Although he's just flashed a card in front of me, and I'm like, oh my god, there's 7 numbers on that card. No. Okay. Do you want? Um, okay, let me see where because I've just had a load of people come in and giving me lots of questions and comments.
Perfect. That's good. Let's try to get as many as we can before we have to go.
Okay. Um, my God, you got to imagine Howard. I'm getting coached by every single person on this call at the same time. So I've just got a flood of emails. Thank you, everyone, for all your kind words. Can you expand, Howard, on why it's hard for you to put a value on the individual as opposed to the company?
Why it's hard to put a yeah. I think the person comment about charging a person. The problem I have, and I think it depends what you're charging. I mean, as Ben said, I'm kind of in the the 6-digit category. My problem is, except a chairman or a CEO or a board member, and even then, if I'm truly going to help them be more effective, I think there's a payback to the company. So I, I would tell you that normally, much like the person asked the question, what if they're going to leave? I have probably done more free coaching for the last couple of months, and I just take it on faith that, if they go, they're at least going to say nice things about me. And for me, that's easier than saying to them, here's a bill for another few $1,000s. It's a personal choice. And that's why I always find personal so difficult, because personal, I'm always so conscious of the money, because I know value, but I also know it's coming out of their sort of before tax dollars, or after tax dollars rather. So that's why I say it. It's just a personal choice.
Okay. Would you agree that not everyone is coachable? Or I'm not sure if you got that, Howard. Would you
No,
agree?
I didn't.
Okay. Would you agree that not everyone is coachable?
Totally agree. And I think that's what makes for bad coaching engagements. I think, and I think we all know it. We just try. And I don't even think it's for money, by the way. I don't think anybody in this call, for most part, it's not a money thing. We think it's sort of the same thing. You could do it on gender, right? We believe we can change them. Well, that's kind of an idiot's play. Even I'm not saying I've never changed a person, but if I can't change them in our first meeting, I can't change it, because it's diminishing returns after that.
Okay.
Back to you, Ben.
Do you suggest dropping a coaching process if a client continues resisting it?
Absolutely. And partially build them. If it happens early enough, I don't even send them bill. But once I've collected data, then I certainly charge them. I never keep going on a coaching engagement that I think is going to be a waste of money and time. And in all honesty, more my time than anybody else's.
Okay. This is a question from me, and this is something that Marshall Goldsmith touched on, and he had a very defined view on. So, if there are questions of ethics within a coaching engagement, someone's behavior, there is a definite level of unethical behavior happening, and in the coach, sorry, in an employee or the senior executive, that is. What would be your response to that in terms of coaching them when there's questions of ethics?
Well, Marshall and I deal with our somewhat different viewpoint on this. I mean, I fundamentally agree with them, but we differ a bit. Sometimes I think there's behaviors that if I can work with them early enough, I can save them. The problem is saving requires them to apologize, to be upfront, and to come up with some real measurable ways that people can let them know if in fact they're still doing the behavior. If there's not that in place, it's not possible. Once people have lost their trust for the person, it's unrecoverable. What I do is tell them to start looking for another job.
Awesome. Howard, just while we're speaking, can you pop up on the screen the urge action questions again.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is this. What do you do if your client avoids disclosure that you know would be helpful to the situation if he were or she were to be transparent?
I am a great believer, and I love this question for one big reason. I am a great believer in describing what you believe to be true and asking for validation. Case in point on this one, I would say, part of me senses there's a critical piece of information you're not telling me that's going to allow me to successfully help you. Am I right? If they say yes, say, okay, to really help, I need to know it. What is it going to take for me for you to be comfortable to tell me? So what I'm really doing, I'm going to take a multi-step process to get them to disclose. I'm not going to say, tell me what it is, because they won't. But if I can say, if I'm going to help, what does it take for me? Now, they may say that I know you're never going to tell anybody. And I'll say, okay, then let's figure it out. Here are the only situations I would tell. It involves a crime. It involves some form of discrimination. Other than that, I'm willing to do it. But understand, not only am I not going to deal with it, I'm probably going to deliberately forget it. So you just need to understand, don't expect me to take action with it. And what I find a lot of the time is people tell me, and the minute they unload on me, they've given me their monkey. They want me to solve it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Have you done any coaching in the area of bullying, and how do you handle the situation?
Yes. Again, I think it's always, for those who were around last time, my always around behavior. It's not around attitude. It's not around personality. So I don't tackle somebody that way. What I do is describe the behavior that's bullying and say to a person, if someone did that to you, what would you feel like and what would you think? So I call it the reverse approach, right? I'll say, now if they say to me, wouldn't bother me, I look at them and say, are you really serious? And if they say yes, lost cause, ditch them, fire them as a coachee.
Okay, awesome. Do you want the vision you see for business? Okay, sorry. Can you expand why it's hard? So I'm just having to fight through. There's a lot of good. You're getting loads of good feedback, by the way, Howard. That's always good.
Well, I love the question, and thanks for the candidness of the questions, because again, as I said at the beginning, I'm not saying I'm 100% right, but if you ask a tough question, I'll at least give you my perspective.
Okay, so won't the client feel vulnerable to opening up if the customer gets feedback reports?
Will the client feel, so you were talking about the coachee? I'm just trying to understand the question, Ben.
Yes, if won't the it says client and customer, so it says won't the client feel vulnerable to opening up if the customer gets feedback reports? So I guess it's the customer being the
Okay,
organization.
does it come? Yeah, exactly. Client's the person, customer is the organization. I think that's true, but again, I think the way you can do that is by talking about it as a real issue. So in saying to the person, look, I know in this particular company they are going to see the feedback reports, then what? Let's agree that I can't, anything in there they're going to see, I can't keep confidential. They already have it. Let's talk about how I can help you, and that we can keep confidential. So a good example, because someone hasn't asked it, but I'm sure they will eventually, which is sometimes people say to me, well, we have to do kind of a coaching report at the end and talk about, what we think the person was like, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, in those things, I'm so generic. I'll just say, look, I think the person made some great, I think they've changed perceptions based on the survey I've done, my little mini survey. The rest is confidential. Because if in fact you can't keep those conversations confidential, I think the person asking the question has a very good point, which is, you know what, they are not going to ever open up. I wouldn't, right? So I can't blame them. Back to you, Ben.
Okay, so when a coaching engagement goes bad, how would you suggest you handle fees in such a situation? So I think what they're talking
If
about.
I've done an whoops, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say. I think what they mean is that if you're partly way through a coaching engagement and you have to cut it off for whatever reason, what would be your suggestions around how to handle that?
Well, I think for most of us on this call, it's never prorated. And I'm very clear when I talk to a client. If for some reason it goes bad, understand it's a front-end loaded process. So case in point, you're sitting down with a person, you're building a plan. That's work that takes a lot longer than ongoing meetings. So I'll say to them normally is understand that if at any point I think this isn't going to work, I'm going to prorate billing, but it won't be equal. But I'll only charge you for the time spent. So my general rule of thumb, let's say it's a 6-month coaching thing, and the first 2 months I'll charge probably half to 60%, and the rest is for the rest of the period, the other 4 months. So it's at least half for the first third.
Okay. There seems to be a high emotional cost in keeping long-term, stagnant or draining relationships. From your experience, in what ways does it affect our coaching and our other clients when we tolerate the coaching relationship that is not working?
Person's absolutely on target. I'm a great believer. I'm a solid believer, and I say skill drives will. And part of skill is, my understanding that I'm good at what I do. If my confidence starts to erode to the point that I don't believe I'm as effective as I think I was, then I think that's why I don't want to take bad coaching engagements and carry them on too long, because it affects me more than the coachee. If it's a bad coaching engagement, coachee doesn't care. They were never taking it seriously anyway. And recognize no matter how good we are, including me, no matter how good you are, if you start working with somebody and it really isn't going well, you pay a huge cost. So my goal is to get out of that as quick as I can. And the next say is pick another coaching situation and do 2 things. One is come up with some really good thoughts for that person that's going to make impact. And the second thing is celebrate the impact you had on them. What we as coaches tend to do is we remember the bad, but we don't celebrate the good. If you don't celebrate the good, it's going to have a negative effect on your confidence, your ability to deliver at a high level.
Awesome. Okay, the next question. The concept, this is probably going to be one of maybe 2 more questions. The concept of an exit strategy for contracting is a wonderful idea. Does this concept make it more of a partnership and joint venture versus a commodity?
Yeah, I think it does. Hopefully there's nobody on the call that's in the outplacement business, because I always say that's management's way of releasing their guilt when they're firing somebody. And I realize sometimes people are laid off, so that doesn't really apply, but it really is a guilt relieving thing. What I want to do, especially if I've been coaching the person a while, is I want to make sure they leave on the right foot. It's my personal tribute back to them. Now, the funny part of the story is, of all those people that I really try to help and really don't charge them anything, and it doesn't take a lot of time, realistically, because they're very sensitive that you're doing it for nothing. The irony of ironies is, I got to tell you, of all the people that I know that are CEOs, chairman, board members that I've worked with, half of them become, flamingo ranch raisers, go do wonderful work for the church. I have a horrible track record of those people actually going into an organization. I'm probably at 50-50. So, but you know what? I feel good because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, and the final question of WBEX 2013 is, what are your favorite ways of and tools for collecting data about the client during the initial assessment phase?
Okay, and I'm going to answer that, but while I'm going to stick up a second last slide for me, because it's 10 long. It's my sort of top 10 list for If everything fails, what can you do as a coach, in case anybody wants to write them down? It depends on the level. The higher someone goes, the more, and when I say executive level, board level, one level below that, I'm a believer that says you have to almost interview people. And the reason is, if you get level, for the most part, you do so many things well that sending out a generic instrument tends to come back pretty flat and doesn't have the impact. Below that, it really I find it doesn't matter much. If sometimes a great compromise, because a lot of clients now have 360 instruments, and sometimes what I'll do as a compromise is say, great, let's use that, or let's take the data. As long as I never coach somebody whose data is more than 6 months old. That'd be the first underlying assumption. Because longer than that, the world could have changed, right? So, but assuming it's less than that, I'll say, let me take that data. I'll ask the person if they mind if I get a copy. Not the company, I'll ask the person. And then what I'll do is say, look, I want to name 3 people that you deal with a lot that you think have a very good perspective on your skills, both strengths and things you could slip on. And I interview those people by phone. And the reason I do it is I want to just augment it, and I don't need many people, but I want enough that I can augment it so that I don't run the risk of making assumptions that aren't correct. And sometimes if they pick the right 3 people, it's amazing how much information you get.
Thank you so much. How do you have some more content to finish off, or are we at the end of the session? I wasn't sure.
We are in beautiful timing as of an hour and a half. Right at the end of my stuff, other than, and certainly if it helps, you can drop me an email. You can send it back through Ben's organization. If you have any questions, I'll certainly get to them. It may take me a few days, but I'll make sure I get to all the questions if I can answer them.
Thank you so much, Howard.
And thanks very much for inviting me, and I'm glad it's been a wonderful success, and I hope everybody on the call has appreciated the value as much as those of us that are participating.
Yeah, so what I would encourage everybody to do who's on the call is to jump onto Facebook, facebook.com/WBECS, and please post your feedback for the session on there. I know some of you have already done that. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. But we would love for you to do that. Now, I hope you have enjoyed WBEX 2013. As you now know from my little coaching session, we have put so much effort into this, and I must give the biggest thank you to my team. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with the people I have. I think my biggest thanks will go out to Sherry, in particular, and also to Nina, who've been absolute rock stars. I could not have done this without them. No way. The other people I'd like to say thank you to are our 2 tech teams of Christy, Michael, Alex, Jonathan, and the Steam team, and Prudvi and Steve and the Zarista team. They're awesome. Trevor, Jed, Ryan, and Julfi in India. All you guys, you've been absolutely amazing and helping us put together this event. Seriously, thank you so much. Yeah, so now I'm going to go drink some beer, party a night away. This is going to be our wrap party tonight, and I'm going to, really enjoy myself. Try and get some rest.
And did you hear from the person from Mumbai, Ben?
Of course I did. First person always. Always, without fail. So thank you so much. It's been incredible. I think that the statistics this year are ridiculous. Like, we have altogether just under 14,000 attendees to the pre-summit from 144 countries. 144 countries? How crazy is that? We grew on our ticket sales by about 46% last year, which is amazing, and the feedback's been better. Now, let me just give you a quick notification. I am going to send you a note shortly. I'm going to invite you to hang out with me on LinkedIn. What would be really great as a thank you, if you've got some value, would be if you can write one of those recommendations on LinkedIn. I forgot to do it last year, so I've got loads from 2011 and none in 2012, and so it'd be cool if you wouldn't mind doing that, if you enjoyed yourselves and you wouldn't mind letting other people know that you had a good time. I'm going to keep doing this every year. well, depending on how Howard's coaching session goes, I guess it will depend whether we do it next year. But I'm guessing that we will do it next year, and for every year moving forward, purely because as much as I'd like to seriously consider the thought of not doing it, just have a year off, realistically, the demand suggests otherwise. And if I'm honest with you, I do really love it because I'm pretty sure we're doing some cool stuff in our industry. Anyway, without further ado, I am going to call an end to this year's WBEX and say thank you so much to everyone for joining us for the sessions. I really, truly hope we've had a profound impact on your success as a business or executive coach. That is our mission, to have a profound impact on your success as a business or executive coach. So if we've done that, then that's our mission complete. And we'll be back again next year and throughout the year with some cool tools, thought leaders. In fact, me and Howard are going to have a chat about what we can do, create some awesomeness for you guys as well. So keep an eye out for that. Anyhow, thank you.
And you can hear part 2 of Ben's coaching session next year.
There you go. Yeah, we'll just keep it rolling. Yeah, so we will certainly be inviting Howard back next year with 100% guarantee. So I will look forward to that. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, and a big final thank you to Howard for his session today. It was brilliant. Jump onto Facebook and let us know how you enjoyed it. And take care, everyone. My absolute pleasure. I will see you next year, and if not before. You can always catch me, Ben, at wbecs.com. That actually does come through to me, and I do actually answer every single email. So take care, everyone. God bless everyone. Bye-bye.